Today, we're talking about an ancient mystery. It all relates to the enigmatic vampire skeletons that were discovered in an old graveyard in Ireland. I'm sure you've heard stories of vampires and folklore, but these skeletons have been linked to more ancient and mysterious tales. So, how did these skeletons come to be buried in Ireland, and why were they thought to be vampires? That's what we're going to find out today. Stick with me as I answer all your questions. In today's video, we will talk about the mystery of the vampire skeletons buried in Kilteasheen, Ireland. Let's delve right in. Vampires? A widespread misconception about vampires was that they not only consumed blood, but also carried the plague. Vampires are a common theme in literature, cinema, and television today, but in medieval Europe, they were a horrifying reality and a sign of impending death. Vampire skeletons mystery charts the development of the vampire from medieval folk dread to 21st century imagination, beginning with the archaeological discovery of disfigured medieval skeletons buried in the west of Ireland. The fear of the dead appears to be deeply ingrained in human nature. But could a few corpses discovered in a deserted field truly prove that vampires once roamed free in Ireland? How were the vampire skeletons buried? And what specific methods were used to prevent them from rising as vampires? Let's first look at how these vampire skeletons were discovered. The vampire skeletons were unearthed in a graveyard close to an old Irish village found in the year 2004. Archaeologists were astonished when they discovered the skeletal remains of individuals that had been treated with a strange and unique burial ritual. They were looking for a 12th century bishop's palace from the Middle Ages. They started digging beneath the collapsed structure's flagstones close to the lost palace. During the excavation, a skeleton was found there with its legs wrapped around a boulder, possibly to prevent the dead from walking. Later, two skeletons were discovered with big stones stuck in their teeth. This was unique because every other skeleton in the cemetery had been interred according to custom for Christians. The skeletons are thought to have been viewed like revenants, who might come back from the dead to prey on the living. The faces that were crushed flat by the floor were visible when the team took up the stones, showing that whoever constructed this building at whatever period was aware that they were doing it directly on top of the human remains, which is a rather ominous and sinister thing to do. All of the skeletons had been staked in the chest. Some experts even said that the remains were around 1,500 years old. It was soon discovered that this strange burial practice had been part of an Irish legend about vampires and evil spirits. How did they bury the vampire skeletons? It's thought that in ancient times, certain precautions needed to be taken to keep these evil vampires in place. The peasants of the period used a variety of defenses to prevent vampires from scaring them, including stuffing a block into a corpse's mouth and driving nails into the body parts to keep corpses in their graves. The staking of the bodies was a way of ensuring that they stayed in the grave. They believed that if a vampire was released, it could create chaos and destruction. Some speculate that the staking technique was specifically laid out in the legend. It also has been speculated that during this time, fear of vampires and other supernatural creatures was so deeply entrenched in Irish culture that it was practiced regularly. One of the skeletons was a young adult, perhaps between the ages of 20 and 30. And the other was a man between the ages of 40 and 60. Each of the two men had a baseball-sized rock forced into his mouth while they were lying side by side. One of them was lying on the ground with his head straight up. A large black stone was intentionally pushed into his mouth. The brick was positioned to prevent the vampire from devouring other people, spreading the epidemic, and consuming its burial shroud. The other man's head was tilted to the side, and an even larger stone was being driven rather forcefully into his mouth, almost dislocating his jaws. But why were these dead people's bodies treated with such savagery? Make sure to subscribe to HISTORYFLIX and dig up that bell icon so you won't miss any of our historical updates. Other vampire burials were discovered in other parts of Europe. There have been other unusual burials discovered beside the ones in Ireland. They've also been found all over Western Europe. In the 1960s, archaeologists in the Czech Republic uncovered skeletons that were weighed down by massive rocks. A woman's skeleton from the 16th century who had a brick wedged between her jaws was found in 2006 in Italy, demonstrating that also in Italy, the belief in vampires was extremely real at the time. In England, strange graves have also been discovered. And although nails were not found with the medieval burials in Southwell, extremely comparable ones were. They were deliberately inserted into the body. One was discovered via the right shoulder, another one went through the left ankle, and two more went through the heart, seemingly on purpose to prevent the body from ever rising again. Archaeologists and historians are starting to suspect that these unsettling medieval burials may have a very specific explanation. These peculiar burials in Ireland and elsewhere are referred to as deviant burials by archaeologists. Deviant translates as odd, anything out of the ordinary or unusual, not what you would anticipate from a Christian burial during this time. Whether you believe in vampires or not, these burial practices have long been associated with them and are an interesting part of history and folklore. Scientists and archaeologists today are still looking for answers as to why these practices were adopted and how they originated. Why were these skeletons buried in such a brutal way? Everything points to the deviant Kilteasheen burials being conducted under the assumption that the deceased would rise from the grave and turn into the medieval equivalent of a vampire. Vampires are a source of fun now, but they were a terrifying reality in the 12th century. The medieval mind was a world of dragons and monsters. They held a belief in paranormal occurrences. Therefore, the thought that the body may return and be reanimated wasn't all that weird, but the church did a lot to promote the concept, because the body went to a place called purgatory after the soul died. Additionally, if the deceased person's soul had led an especially terrible life, it would suffer the most atrocious forms of punishment. Despite the centuries that have passed, the mystery of the vampire skeletons buried in Ireland remains unsolved. Pundits are still debating the implications of this eerie phenomenon, and it may very well remain shrouded in rumor and superstition. But there is one thing that scientists can agree on, that this fascinating mystery is just another reminder of how mysterious our history is, and how much we still have to learn. Fascinating reminder. The vampire skeletons are a fascinating reminder of the lore and mythology that was once so prevalent in Irish culture. Even centuries later, the strange mystery of the vampire skeletons continues to spark debate. It can be said that the remains are a unique testimony to the old customs of a bygone era. Is this just a strange practice or a legend that has been passed down from generation to generation? Unfortunately, we may never know. So that wraps up the mystery of the vampire skeletons buried in Kilteasheen, Ireland. If you like this, subscribe to our channel and explore more history and mystery with us. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to let us know what you would like to see and what you think about this video in the comment section. Check out our other videos on HISTORYFLIX. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, goodbye.